All right, so we're now live again. So welcome everyone back to the meeting. Thank you for that brief adjournment. We are going to reshuffle the agenda, and so for those who may be watching online, we are moving to item 8.5, and it's the report on the 6-month update for the Economic Development Kotahitanga Board, page 129 of the agenda. And today we've got Darren and not the ED team. Anyway, Darren Grant, sorry, there's a changing of titles and so forth, and also Neil, Chair of the Kotahitanga Board, with us today to walk us through the 6-month update. Neil's going to do a short introduction, go through the presentation, and I'll see whether there's anything to add from you, Darren, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Buswell, who's also elected member appointed to the Kotahitanga Board, and then I'll open it up for questions. So over to you, team.
Okay. Well, tēnā koutou. And look, thank you for the opportunity to present my report covering the 6 months of the tenure of the board. Look, the strategy and implementation plan and the performance agreement for year one has really provided the framework for the board to operate in the first 6 months. The ED team has had a program of work which has included many of the actions on the plan, and the board members have used the 6-month period to reach out to their networks and have primarily focused on business and investment opportunities, economic activity prospects in the district, and establishing new networks. The board has prioritised, it's taken that implementation plan with all of those 50 actions in it, and it's prioritised it in a way really to identify what it can lead in, what it can support of those items, and as such, that's produced us with a starting point for what we need to develop further on. So the board fundamentally is looking to refine that strategy so that it focuses on sectors that will drive the economic growth of our district. And we've got to get out the resource required to deliver the plan. What's the ED team? What can they do? What expertise can we call on? And what funding can we access? So we're working very closely with MB, the Provincial Development Unit, Wellington, New Zealand, and others to progress this. So from all of that, what we've actually got to then do is produce another performance agreement that incorporates these elements. And this needs to be developed, for the 21-22 financial year, and so too an agreement with Wellington, New Zealand, that covers the key sector growth and development funding and support requirements. So they're clear about what it is that they're able to provide for us. We're clear about what it is that we want from them. So the board is due, I think, in the next 6 months to come back and to explain that and to position that with you. In the meantime, we'll be positioned with Wellington, New Zealand in the next 2 months for what it is that we're intending to do. So now to sort of matters of this report, I just take it that you've read the report, so I don't intend to go through the full report. Just want to make a couple of points, if I could, and then take those questions. So the board has really come together quite nicely. They've been active and productive. Unfortunately, Rawiri Faulkner has just resigned. He's accepted a new role with Te Ranga Alliance, and made an excellent contribution in the last 6 months. So Ngāti Tā are now looking for a replacement. The report is aligned to the performance agreement that we have with Council. We've been quite down on ED resource. The ED team has gone through quite a churn, and we've been operating at less than 40% capacity. So that's impacted really on our ability to meet some of the targets. There's been a bit of slippage on the workforce plan, and there's been a bit of slippage on the development of the key sector strategy. What I'd like to do is acknowledge, though, the work that was done by Liana Hill. She stepped up to the acting management role, and she's coped very, very well. The economic indicators, top line indicators, we've just got a March update. They're very, very similar to what we had for December 2020. The fundamental thing there, I guess, is that that while they're positive against the national numbers and indicators, there are some impacts, ongoing impacts, on those that are most vulnerable, long-term unemployment, housing affordability areas, and other areas that we also need to focus on as well. So look, I can go on a bit and tease out aspects of this, but probably it's best just to go to question time and hear what you've got to ask, and then I can respond to those. And if I feel that there's something left over, I'll come back to that.
Thanks, Neil. Before we do that, I just want to check with Darren whether you want to add anything to the report itself or anything to what Neil has said. And then I'll move to Councillor Buswell and then to questions.
No, I suppose you just take the report as read. I think that the focus should be on the engagement with Neil in terms of the chair and councillors and the work they've been doing.
All right, over to you, Councillor Buswell. If we'll just wait for your light to go red, it's all yours, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you. I would just like to say, as a role as a councillor, we have so many meetings each month, and by far the Kotahitanga board meeting is one of the most exciting and innovative, and I think that is just because of the calibre of people we have on that board, not to diminish any other board or whatever I'm on, but it's really exciting to hear and feel the energy from those people wanting to contribute in a really substantial way. So around that table at the moment, we've got about 3 projects that our board is working super hard on, and all of those projects are bringing together different ministries working together, different financial pots to get things moving. So there is a hell of a lot of energy going into what's going on there. So I would just like to thank the board, and particularly Neil, and also our KCDC staff for backing our board as much as they can under the circumstances. So that's all I've got to say. And I do believe that they are fulfilling the role that our community expected in terms of an independent board. I really encourage the momentum that started.
Thank you. Thanks, Ange. So are you saying our strategy and operations meeting isn't exciting? I'm hurt. Look, I said I'd go to questions, but just one aspect that I did want to add was, from my personal experience, although I don't sit on the board, I did sit on the Māori Economic Development Grants Committee, which I have done previously, and for the first time ever we had 2 members of the Kotahitanga board, one by 2 members, actually 3, given the chair is also appointed via Te Whakaminanga, and it just brought a real richness and another level of knowledge and experience to that discussion, and for the small amount that is considered within that grant process, I mean, I'm just making this number up, but it almost doubled those funds in terms of the knowledge and the different connections and so forth that were available there. So, personally, I could say that I saw that at work, and having the connections around the table there. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. I think we've got Mr. Burns. Now, I did say to Neil that given the nature of the work that they do, there may be some stuff that is confidential, and Neil will simply let you know. There may be something that he would prefer to take offline and provide more detail given the time within the meeting, and there's obviously stuff that he'll be free to discuss out of the report as well. So, Mr. Burns.
Mr. Mackay, in terms of your report, point 2, how do you see the Gateway project being a cornerstone project in terms of economic development? Can you more elaborate on that, please?
So, repeat that again, please.
How do you see the Gateway project as being a cornerstone project in terms of economic development for Kāpiti?
Oh well, it's actually quite interesting, because the destination plan itself is now identifying and bringing forward some data, some research data, which I don't know if I've got that information in front of me, but it's really highlighted the very high interest there is in Kapiti Island and travelling to Kapiti Island, and So there's research that's come out of Colmar Brunton, there's research that's come out of TLC, is it?
TRC.
TLC.
Yeah.
And they've identified, that is something that really hasn't been marketed, but when it's been made obvious to those on the Colmar Brunton research, they've actually then identified that with about the top 3 in the Wellington area, which included Te Papa Special Exhibitions and Tongariro, which I thought was rather odd, and ourselves. So look, it's just not been marketed. It will be certainly, it will profile things much more readily, and I'm sure we'll see the benefit of that with our tourism numbers in the future.
Who have we got next? Who's up next?
Automatic.
No, turn it off, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for a excellent report, Neil. Much appreciated. I just wanted to pull something out of the report. It says KCDC is responsible for ensuring there is adequate resource to deliver the outcomes relating to the priorities. I appreciate that the board's in the process of getting up and running.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable that you're seeing either those funds there or the pathways to those funds are defined or cleared, or is that something that needs to be worked on in regards to the next long-term plan and how that looks?
The latter, really. The first 6 months, as I say, has been quite traumatic in the sense that the ED team and key players, Darren was away for 5 of those 6 months, and we've got him back again, and thank goodness for that. But only because it really did decimate the team. There was a lot of on special projects, and there was just not a lot of availability there. But I think we're now in a better place in terms of what the path ahead of us is, and the fact that we need to qualify the resource that we need in order to progress a number of these projects that we've got in front of us at the moment. So we've got to be looking wider, and we have been, and we've been developing those networks, and we've got a pathway that I think is going to generate what we would hope for, which is the growth and development that we aspire to.
Cool. Thank you for that, Neil. The other question I had was just more around comms and visibility. Just some feedback I'm getting is that not a lot of awareness of what you guys are doing out there as such. I'm just wondering how we can. Is there a comms process, or how we would be willing to bring the community with us on this journey, if you like?
It's a good point, and yes, we are developing a comms plan. We just wanted to hunker down for the first 6 months and just see what we had around the table and explore what they could bring to the table, and internalise that to some extent and develop it so that we're at the stage now where we can start to share with what we've been doing, and we've got to be, and we are moving to actually working with the Kitas and others of the world to have these conversations as well, because they will have some lead roles in delivery in and around the implementation plan as well.
Cool.
So yes, we're moving to a more open comms process.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Holborough.
Thanks, Neil. Fantastic work going on for this first year, really positive. I was going to ask about comms too, actually, so I'd just like to follow up on that a little bit.
Sure.
In terms of branding, comms, online presence, all that kind of stuff, do you have enough funding and resources to deliver that side of things?
No, not at this stage, no. Simply, we're using what funds we've got, for more of what I would call a more productive use. I think there is a time where we can spend a lot more on those activities, but probably not in the next stanza. In the next 6 months, I wouldn't see us doing that. I'd see us beyond that 6 months. I would see us spending a bit more time on websites and other such channels.
Fantastic. So I do think it's really important to get that message out there. I think it's really
and I think it's not all or nothing. I think we will need to find some forms of doing that in between time.
Just going to have a comment from Darren.
In terms of the work that the ED team, so we're currently looking at the information on the council website, and we'll want to make sure that there is a good presence in terms of the board and understanding of the board members and all those sorts of things on the council website, so people can access that, as well as on the kapiticoastnz.com website. So making sure that we're using the current templates that we have to promote the board and make sure there's awareness of the board. We're also looking at the way that we structure some of our projects going forward. So things like the workforce plan, which we're just about to start work on or underway, and the invitations for people to participate coming from the board as opposed to council, because the board is actually leading as a lead partner in that work, and making sure that we're more proactive in those spaces in terms of the board and their role in these projects as well.
His Worship the Mayor.
The Council has got three main foundational documents in terms of processes into the future. That would be the long-term plan, the growth strategy, and the district plan. How is your strategic thinking in terms of how you are active as shape shifters in this process to inculcate or shape the growth strategy and changes in the district plan? Are you thinking in those terms to deliver what you need to deliver?
Certainly, we are. As I said, the first stanza was about low-hanging fruit and getting moving. But certainly, you know, the strat plan and the implementation plan are aligned to that. And we're connecting to the LTP. You know, we made a submission. I know we made a submission on an educational training hub. We're looking at some sector aspects in and around that. We've even talked about. It's a strategy that's sort of intergenerational, and the needing to bind some of those together. We've only just started, and we'll develop our thinking a lot more so that we are showing much more visible connectivity to those plans. So we're underway. We are connecting to aspects of it, but you know, I think after 6 months, you know, we're not there yet by a long chalk.
Don't see any further questions. One back from Councillor Halliday. I'm just going to jump in there, Martin, then I'll come back to you. There's been a lot of discussion, both recently and over the last 12, or even longer than 12 months, around the performance of Wellington NZ. You touched on it briefly. Maybe just elaborate further on the work that you have done there with the Chief Executive and team at Wellington NZ and opening up some doors down there. Yeah, well, Wellington NZ, certainly, John Allen, I've met with him a few times. We're actually going to bring him and the chair of the board to one of our board meetings, not the next one, but the one after, to talk to them about what we want from them and clearly what they can provide to us. That conversation hasn't really happened because they haven't received the what do we want from them part of the equation. They have at a high level and they've interpreted the way that they wanted to, but it hasn't been definitive enough. So we were looking to engage much more fully with them. We wanted just to get our heads around exactly what we want from them and what they can actually deliver to us. What we do if there's going to be some deficit in terms of the value that we would see or otherwise, we need to find a way of dealing with that. But certainly it's advanced. The discussions have been positive. They've identified, I think, about 4 or 5 sort of sectors that they're looking at, and there's potential for them supporting one of our sectors, and there's potential for us supporting one of their sectors in terms of how we proceed. So there's a form of integration that's going on there as well, which is quite positive. That's great. Councillor Halliday.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, I just want to follow up on something that Mr. Spratt presented to our long-term plan discussions last year. You just mentioned the word portfolios, that you might be breaking the group into portfolios as such. I was just going to suggest if that was the case, if they could contact or perhaps marry up with the portfolios that we have as well, it would be much appreciated.
Yeah, look, I think at the moment we're looking at sectors, you know, and perhaps niche parts of sectors. So we're looking at things like IT, you know, health would be, you know, an example, if you like, of a niche sector, and we're looking at, and obviously we've identified, you know, the ageing the population and what we can do by way of means of taking a lead on some of these activities as well. So it won't be a matching portfolio. It's certainly looking to see what are, you know, it's looking at quite a different set of criteria, if you like. The criteria being what sector has the opportunity of growing and developing us in a way that we can benefit.
Neil, could you give an opportunity and a example of that? And I think looking at the report, there's the seaweed-based feedstock, and I know you've talked to me about
Sure,
that, and
yeah.
also the regenerative agricultural
Yeah, by all
opportunities, and then how that sort of fits in from a sector sense. And then I'll come back to, do you have a follow-up question?
Just response. I don't think that maybe it's not very clear there.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't talking to a line in portfolios.
Oh, I see.
If you've got activities happening that are relative to the crossovers, if you get involved in those conversations, just so we're aware of what's going on.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'm sorry. Wrong answer to the
That's all good.
to the right question.
Do you want to touch on just one of those, and then I'll come to Councillor Elliot, so maybe the agricultural, the seaweed?
Yeah, well, look, Asparagopsis seaweed, it's a red seaweed, and it's currently wild harvested around New Zealand, and that's obviously not a sustainable practice. It needs to transition, into a aquaculture farming. The seaweed contains a high concentrate of bromoform, which all seaweed has bromoform, but this has high concentrations, and it disrupts the enzymes of gut microbes. I thought you should know that. To the extent that it suppresses flatulence in cows by something like 90%. We looked at the Raumati pools as a proof of concept facility, because if you're moving to aquaculture, you need to move and do a proof of concept, and then obviously there's a whole lot of in vivo trials and other things that are sort of centred around that. So, we're currently talking to a company that at the moment those trials are being conducted in Australia. They're conducted on prawn farms, so you can actually utilise the space for two lots of opportunities. One actually, there's nutrients flow to the other, but certainly, so we're talking to organisations like that, and it's new. They're new sectors. They're not sectors that we're working through at the moment. So that manufacturing and distribution is another one, which is a clean energy sector. It's an overseas company that's already in this area. It wants to be part of. It wants to come here. Iwi have an opportunity of shareholding it. It's not a small business. It's probably 150 to 200 employees. It needs access to training facilities. So there's a whole picture that, where it all interfaces, and we can sort of grow the economy and grow it in a as integrated way as we possibly can. So they are some of the things that are happening. Just a wee bit more flesh on the bones, as it were.
Councillor Elliot, and then I don't have any further from there, so if there isn't any further questions, we'll wrap it up at the end. So, Jackie?
Look, thank you, Neil, for your work and for this very thorough report. I just wanted to support comments made by my colleagues here about one of these. This board is quite special and special to us, and I think what makes it special is all the energy and really quite colourful, engaging people on it. And I would just like to say that, without taking up a lot of their time and your time, that I would love the opportunity to engage with you and hear their ideas and a less formal setting from time to time. I just think that would be really great if possible. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think it's possible to bring the board along and have a conversation. It's important. We are going to start getting into the community a lot more with discussions with IT, in various sectors and so on. But let's see what we can work out. We do indeed.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Councillor McCann.
Cheers.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. I was actually going to ask a very similar question about how we can make sure that the board remains very connected to council, and the next part of that question, though, is slightly different. There have been suggestions that we should be funding more for the board so it can have its independence, or should the board be bringing specific projects to council and then a decision's made on independent projects? What's your thoughts about the two different operating models?
Just to clarify, suggestions through the long-term plan.
Oh, okay, right. To be more effective, the board does need to be an entity of some form. It needs to have its own funding, and it needs to be able to exhibit that sort of bit more independence. There are certain restrictions at the moment of funds that we can access because of the board's status. You're looking at things like, what do they call them, the CCOs? CCO would be a nice example of where the board could morph into, but it has to earn the right. And at the moment, and earning that right is putting some runs on the board and demonstrating that it can, and operate in a different way and more effectively for the community.
So you are suggesting that that's a step in the future. We're not there yet.
I'm thinking that it's a step in the future, but probably not in the too far future.
Awesome, thanks.
So I guess the key point, what I heard from there is a proven track record and getting some runs on the board and establishing some confidence within the community around this table. So, well, I don't see any further questions. So if there's nothing further that you two gentlemen want to add, we'll move on from there. So team, we've just got the recommendations which are found on page 131. That is no problem, Councillor Randall. So we're going to move. Councillor Randall's requested that we go through the recommendations separately. So page 131, recommendation 21. Do we have someone that wants to move? Councillor Elliot, seconded by Councillor Buswell. Right of introduction.
Sorry. Look, I'd just like to extend my thanks. So just extend our thanks from this table to your board and your members for your work thus far, and very much appreciated. Thank you. And of course to our councillor representative on this board as well.
I'm going to open that up for debate. There is none. I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Recommendation 22. Someone want to move that? Moved by Councillor Buswell. Seconded by Councillor Hanford. Right of introduction.
I would just like to say that it's great to see that the Economic Development Strategy implementation plan is being updated, because it actually means that we're ticking things off, we're moving things along, and I think that this is also a reflection of the recovery plan that the council have got going on. So a lot of elements that were moved into our recovery plan are reflected in our economic development strategy, which again gives it more impetus to move things along. So this is great to see that we're updating it. Thank you.
Thank you. Open that up for debate. Don't see any. Right of reply, I'm assuming, is waived. So I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? And that's carried. Recommendation 23, Councillor Buswell, moved. Councillor McCann, seconded. Right of introduction.
I would just like to say that I support the reappointment of Neil Mackay as the independent chair of the Kotahitanga board for another 12 months. I feel that the momentum has just started. We've got some great characters on the board, and Neil certainly engages and gets the best out of them. So thank you.
Open that up for debate. Councillor McCann.
I would just like to acknowledge what Councillor Buswell has just said, and that I think Neil has demonstrated really strong leadership, and also that continuity is required to make progress. So I think we've got the best of both worlds.
Councillor Elliot.
Yes, and likewise, I consider that we in the district are very, very lucky to have you on board leading this project. Thank you.
I don't see any further more. Just a quick comment from me. As Chair of Strategy and Operations, I've had a little bit of contact with Neil. We certainly don't meet weekly, but in the times that I've met with him in my capacity as Chair, he's always been very open. The team are just amazing. I haven't met with all of them to the same level, but I've had involvement with them in a couple of other occasions, obviously the Māori Economic Development one as well, and as Councillor Elliot has said, we've got a real group of talent around that table, and a real desire to serve the community. certainly seen that in action. And Neil has, as others have said, certainly I'm satisfied that he's fulfilling his role as chair, happy with the extension of the appointment. I think the real test, Neil, will be the next 6 months, because I think it's really the last has just been getting feet under the table, to be fair, and obviously there's been some churn in the ED team around support and so forth. So the show's not over yet. There's going to be some further discussions, and obviously the talk of the group moving into some other sort of entity as well will be another discussion around this table, I'm sure, at some stage. So yeah, I'm absolutely happy with that continued role that you serve. So I don't see any further right of reply. No, so I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. No from Councillor Randall. Do you want that noted?
I'm not asking for a decision.
Yeah, but do you want that noted? Okay, noted. Councillor Randall voted against. And so, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And we're going to move on now to the update that we were unable to progress earlier. I'm sorry, gentlemen. Thank you for your patience. Tanya, if you could take two, and back over to you.
Councillor Coops, how much time do we have to present?
I normally allow 15 minutes for the presentations and 5 minutes for questions. Is that sufficient?
That's cool, yes.
Okay.
Another one. Yeah, all good. Kia ora again. So today we were doing a joint presentation with Grey Power, so you'll hear from Trevor and Kevin today, and from the chair of the Older Persons Council, David. But just to get us started, today you'll get we'll bring you up to speed of a little bit of back history, spend about a minute on that, and then Grey Power will present the survey's findings that they've been undertaking over the past little while, which will inform our age-friendly approach, and then if there's time we'll just move on to what's next, what we've been doing in a brief timeline. But just to bring us to where we are today, so in 2011 we adopted age-friendly strategy. It was called He Tera Kaumatua. It had a set of 7 goals. Following on from that, there has been quite a bit of LTP wording that has led us to put it inside our policy work program. In 2019-2020, we thought we would have finished, done and dusted our age-friendly strategy, but COVID put a bit of a hold up on that one. But we plan to still complete it coming up soon, and we'll run through that timeline at the end of the presentation. But just to move forward and get Grey Power up here, in 2019, actually it might have been 2018, the Office of Seniors awarded some funding to Grey Power to undertake an engagement process to help Kāpiti build an age-friendly approach. In 2020 and 2019, Grey Power did some workshops and community engagement sessions, followed by a qualitative survey, which they'll run through the findings, and they've been presenting back to community groups as well. But I'd just like to invite Trevor up, who will probably introduce Kevin.
Good morning, Trevor and Kevin.
Good morning. I have Kevin, and I invited Roger Booth along as chair of Age Concern, but he had other commitments. You older councillors, or not old, councillors who've been here for years will know that Jill Stansfield, when she was chair of the OPC, really pushed this, but recently she took ill. So then we took up the cudgels by Grey Power took up the cudgels, and Kevin managed the process, so I'll pass over to Kevin to tell you what happened. Thank you.
That's right. Morning, everyone. This is actually a presentation we give to, which one is it? That one. We give to a meeting of Grey Power associations of the Lower North Island, about 20 of them there, because because they want to. So the first part of the presentation is about how we've got here, what we did to get here, and the second part is the results of the surveys that we did in there. So we, as it pointed out, we received a $10,000 grant from the Office of the Seniors. We failed in our first attempt at that, actually, but we're going on the second one. And we also, in helping to do that, we got letters of support from the Mayor, thank you, and the two MPs that were there at that time, the different MPs now, and they were successful in doing that. We also signed and worked with Council on an agreement of how to cooperate with this, and it was important for us to do that. And I'd like to take the opportunity of thanking Council staff here, because they've done very well on this, and we've worked well together in there. Part of the that's the outline, the shape of the project. We held some workshops around the district. The original intention was, after the workshops, to do some focus groups, but then we got into the lockdown, and of course causing major problems. And, so we changed it, because we decided even after the lockdown, people would be very reluctant to attend public meetings of any kind. Anyway, so we changed it to a survey, and the workshops we did employ a facilitator for that in there, and that worked out well. And we also established a steering group. And then we also gathered information from what we wanted to do, was gather information from a wider community, from a wider audience in there. So we did. This is the policy stuff that's coming up now in there. Excuse me a sec. I need to get these on here. For the health services, which is up there, there was a ability to find information about health services. It varied significantly. You know, people couldn't find out what was happening or where to go for health services. And the results showed also a high dependency on private transport to get to a medical facility. What was interesting about it is that we asked the questions, and people responded to that. But we also, in all of these questions, we had a free text where they could say basically what they wanted. We limited them to 20 words. And the hospital came, or 24-hour service came up very, very regular during the free text thing. Yeah. This one's about public transport. The public transport use was very low, actually, and people were using the private cars, private transport. And people use their Go card on a reasonably regular basis, but for the longer trips, you could sort of imagine it to Wellington and stuff like that, really. And there was a high, very high level of satisfaction with walking. People tend to walk everywhere, mainly for the exercise thing, which has got implications, which we'll come to later on, actually. On the footpaths, this is about the walking. There were concerns over the footpaths in there. Those concerns were about a lack of maintenance and changes to the service level and the use of non-pedestrians on footpaths, scooters, bicycles, etc. This one is about social interaction, and people were quite willing to, of course, when they did this, they just come through the lockdown, which probably affected some of their thinking on this. And but yeah, people were quite concerned about about social interaction. While there was a reasonably high level of people joining various clubs, sporting clubs, and various sort of bridge clubs, you name it. There was also some sort of concern about people loneliness, basically, which seemed to be quite a big issue for some people. Housing, again, housing, all the returns said people were very high response. I think it was in the 90s% said that they wanted council to be more active in housing. Weren't quite specific about what they wanted, but because it was a general question. And there was a marked difference because the survey we did was online and paper, and we had 77 response on paper and 800 and some online, and there was quite a difference in there. But when you think about it, the people who responded by paper, the obvious reason is they don't have a computer or access to a computer in there, which probably means, and they were the ones that were saying they're having real problems with housing. There was a couple I could only describe as heartbreaking in the free text. They were saying they would have to leave their house and that sort of thing. And that again is about housing, providing homes at below market rates for people who can't afford it, etc. And these are the policy, what we saw as the policy implications coming out of that. Health, access to after hours, which of course has always been an issue around the place. Transport, provision and maintenance of high quality footpaths, again, walkways, social interaction, and housing. Those are sort of the main issues that we sort of come out. That's it really. I mean, and just to finish off here, just like to say that this was a survey that was done by us, but I wouldn't describe it as a professional survey by any stretch of imagination. There is some holes in there, basically, that people, and they just need further investigation, some of those issues. And that's it, really. Oh, excuse me.
If you'd like a copy of the Grey Power report, we can get that to you, if that's okay, Kevin.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thanks,
and
Tanya.
just-
That was one of the.
Yep.
But just on the LG Hub, if we could have that uploaded, that would be
Yep, and
awesome.
the other great thing is that they had the support of Professor Stevens
Oh,
from Massey's
Stevens,
University to help with the survey.
Yeah, I should just say a thank you to her because she helped present. When we looked at those questions, we looked at what had happened around other surveys of this kind. And we never engaged, we had the help of Professor Chris Stevens from Massey University, who's the head of the ageing unit up there. She does a lot of research into ageing and stuff like that.
Thanks very much, Kevin. So I see Councillor Randall's got his light there for a question.
Yep.
So, Councillor Randall.
It's a good report, actually. Age-friendly. I have it here. Right. And my question relates to footpaths. As a councillor, and I get a lot of representations from older people in the community about poor maintenance of some footpaths, in other words, and for older people in particular, having a smooth footpath makes it easier. So, do you think we should be advocating more money in the long-term plan for footpaths? And there are some streets in Paraparaumu that don't even have a footpath at all; they just have berms. So, what's your view? What's the age-friendly view on that?
I certainly think there needs to be a hard look at footpaths. When you talk about allocating more money, I understand completely their priorities and stuff. You're working through all of those sorts of stuff, but certainly I think there needs to be a hard look at that sort of issue. Because you're quite right. I mean, it's difficult for some people walking if you've got an uneven service, but it's even more so if you're in a motor scooter or wheelchair or something like that, if you're bumping up and down. So sort of all those problems can't go on.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. So the first question, thank you very much for a very good summary of the survey findings. I just wondering if you just quickly run over the numbers again of those people who did the paper survey versus the online survey, please.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I have them with me. Anybody got them with me?
800 was one,
yeah.
800 for...
It was 840 something online.
And it was a 700 odd for the other one,
And
was it?
77 the other one.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's great. So I actually just wanted to make a comment about footpaths as well. So yesterday in the long-term plan, the LTP hearings, we heard from Wellington Living Streets, and she made one of the comments that there's a move these days towards shared paths, and I suppose some of the fears that people have walking along a shared path when there's other modes of transport, particularly bikes and e-bikes. And I can see why that's happening because of funding, but what you've shown in your results, that has been borne out. And I'm just wondering if you want to make any more comment about specifically the shared paths versus individual or separate pathways and cycleways.
There is an issue though, without a doubt. I mean, speeding is one of them. And I've been walking down a shared pathway when a bicycle come without a sound, and that's part of the problem. Yeah, without a sound, they come whizzing past you and scare the living daylights out of you, to put it bluntly. So, I mean, I think speed limits for those things should be seriously looked at. And what kind of transport goes on there? Certainly, I've got no problem with wheelchairs or mobility scooters, that sort of thing.
I think Trevor wants to add something to that discussion, and then we're going to move on.
Sorry, Trevor.
Yeah, thank you. some time ago, the Transport Department, NZLTA, put out a discussion document, and they very quickly backed off it, and it's disappeared. One of the problems with older people is hearing, and I know that in some jurisdictions they require vehicles that go on the footpath to make a sound. I know that at least one council has made bylaws about use of footpaths, and that's something we'd like to push ahead with sometime. Thank you.
So just a follow-up question. Do you think that people are actually not using shared footpaths because of the potential fear of other, bikes and e-bikes on them?
I don't know, but I can tell you that the shared footpath down Poplar Avenue is about that wide.
Okay, thank you.
All right, team, I don't see any further questions. Clear? Yep, sure. So just mindful of time, I'm just trying to, because we've got audit and risk this afternoon.
So I've got an hour or half an hour, is it? It's so exciting. I'm a chartered accountant and I spent a couple of years in local body stuff. I might become an officer or elected person. It's so exciting sitting here for 2 hours, listening to you guys.
We've just spent about 30 hours listening to hearings on the long-term plan. So
yeah, that's I know. Well done. Gee, you're just servants of us ratepayers. So I just want to comment. I made a submission, and there's one or two things I want to point out as I talk about the very good report that's been done by Grey Power. Coming in last year, they put me on the Older Persons Council and somehow became the chair of that. And the report is good. It's fine, it's a bit bourgeois. I mean, the people that are making submissions have sort of got a computer, live in a gated community, and it's not really independent it's not really indicative of all of the population of the older people, in my view. But it's good. It's good material to use. But what I found was that the Office for Seniors has this document here, which coincides with the work that's been done by people like Jenny Rowe and other people's staff, our excellent staff. And I would really emphasise that is something to be built on as well. One or 2 points that are the keystones that go through in this thing are things that were very important to us, I think. The finances of older people, the health of older people, the housing, and I may say that the report on 51 and 52 of your documents today is very good. It touches upon a lot of the key issues. I want to compliment you. I understand that's the officer over here. Some of the officers and people are responsible for these sort of things. But of course we can get the Prime Minister to help us. She's built 470 houses in 4 years, or one of them is the Crown. I know something to document it. He owns 35 houses, I won't mention names, but some of these people do have the talent, and if we do, but I don't recommend here that you people build houses. We haven't got the money here. Well, you guys haven't got the money. Get the government to do it. They can borrow the money. It's very low interest rate, but we can have the expertise here, and we can be the fulcrum and the energy to organise.
I think we've got those messages through the long-term plan submissions. Ogden, so have you got anything further you want to add? Because I'm just conscious of time, otherwise.
Yeah, okay. Well,
in regards to the report itself?
That's all right. I think, though, one thing that I think we could have a consolidated group for the older persons. This is probably the second largest demographic concentration of older people in the country. I understand that Coromandel's the other. And I think we could have a look at some sort of council. People are on our group. Fantastic. We have a great time. Come along if you want to. And a group of individuals. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do I get another half an hour?
You're done. I do have some questions of my own, which I'm going to direct to staff, because in the need to move on, I don't need them replied to now. So one of them we had touched on just at the presentation is provided on the LG Hub. The second one was just about whether the information will be provided to, and this is just to staff, to the likes of Greater Wellington regarding public transport and the other organisations, because I think it helped inform their processes. And then the last one was, again, how the organisation responds where the report goes from here, there's feedback there around footpaths and other different bits and pieces that touch on other areas of activity. So Tanya's going to have a quick... Claire?
So one of the things that came out of our memorandum of collaboration with Grey Power was the fact that we were coming in to look at the gaps in their surveying. And so this is our next part of our work, is casting the net wider. So we're currently working with a researcher from Otaki to look at, she's done a district-wide plan with our local kaumātua. And she's coming, after reporting back to those kaumātua, will come back with a report to us with some recommendations. And then we're also working with someone around the community groups and getting some voices of our service providers, so plugging some of the gaps that are obvious in the research that Grey Power have done.
Thank you, Claire. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Tanya?
No.
And Councillor Holbrook, I saw you had your light. No, that's it. All right, we're going to wind it up there. Councillor Brock, last question, and then we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you. So also through the LGP hearings, we heard about, I suppose, wheelchair usage on footpaths and curbing and stuff like that. Is this report going to be looking at that as well? Best practice versus the practices that are normally used?
Yes, it will.
Great, thank you.
I think another aspect of that, Councillor, was the disability strategy, which will be considered, and noting, I think, in this report, there's a review before the end of the year around our strategies and policies for the next 3 years. All right, Claire and Tanya, thank you so much for the work that you've done, also noted by Kevin and Trevor. And so I appreciate everything that you and the team behind you do. And we've just got a comment from Ms. McDougall.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Look, I just wanted to acknowledge that timing has not been on our side today, unfortunately, and Tanya and Claire did have some more material to take councillors through in relation to what the next steps are in the process from here, that I think will answer some of those questions. So I suggest that we share the remainder of this presentation from today with you, and we're happy if any of the councillors would like to get in touch and ask some more questions. And we may look at bringing back a specific update to a future strategy and operations meeting about those next steps, if that suits you.
Thank you, Janice. All right, team, so we're getting along, just mindful that we do have audit and risk at, what time is that, Councillor Compton? 1:30. And so we're now currently sitting at 11:30. I'd normally stop for a break now, but we had a break earlier, so I'm going to truck on.
Excuse me,
Councillor Halliday?
Yeah, look, as portfolio holder, I have actually been waiting to have comment, as we perhaps pointed to at the end of this. I wouldn't mind winding this up with some comments, if that's all right.
Look, Councillor, that's absolutely fine. If I could just ask elected members, what I'm finding as chair happening is that I'm looking around the room, there's no lights up on the screen, and then as I'm about to move on, someone pushes their button. So if the screen will stack members if they want to speak or ask questions, and I just encourage, if you want the meeting to flow nicely and questions stick to questions, comments through debate, if you've got something. Councillor, I did ask you at the start, so absolutely no problem. So over to you, and then we're going to move on to the next item.
Look, and I'll be very, very brief, Mr. Chair. Look, I just wanted to, so I guess bring this together a little bit as portfolio holder. Look, I'm very, I've made no bones about the age-friendly process being a very, very good process for us to work towards with regards to almost a lens over council activity, if you like. I know it's not going to get the sort of lens that the environment's going to get, but I'm very encouraged that we're actually reviewing this policy this year as part of the work program. So we're moving from the strategy of positive ageing, if you like, and it's going to be incorporating the age-friendly approach to this as well. So I'm expecting the holes that have been talked about to be picked up during the process of that, as I think we've heard there mentioned by staff as well. So this is ongoing. This is about to ramp up as a process, and I see the age-friendly aspect of it being very much a part of being able to then inform a lot of our council processes and decisions with regards to things like footpaths, like housing, and other aspects that are relevant to the elderly. I'll just very briefly touch on our chair, David Olgan's view around the makeup of the Older Persons Council. We've discussed this a little bit as well, perhaps that being a little bit, having a little bit more of a formal aspect as part of that, so that there's maybe stronger advocacy in that space as well as we move forward that can also feed into the other committees. There's a lot of funding sort of heads towards youth and other things, not taking anything away from that at all, Councillor Hanford. Not so much funding towards our elderly. They seem to be more relied on to voice their concerns as such, so I think it's going to be important that have that ability to happen, and I think that influence will perhaps come more that way, if you like. So I'm very much looking forward to working with the team and ensuring that we get a good, solid policy moving forward that really adds a voice, but also adds respect and it adds security around our elderly population as well, because it's a demographic that is only growing. And it's certainly a big part, especially in the volunteer space and potentially also in the business space as well, as we develop as a society over the next 10 and 20 years.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, Councillor Randall, I see you've got your light there. I allowed Councillor Halliday to speak because I was portfolio holder. We're now moving on through the agenda. It's nothing personal. We've obviously got quite a bit more to get through. So,
my question is I'm just going to endorse what Councillor Halliday said.
Great, thank you very much. Excellent. So if we could invite staff up to item 8.1 of the report, and that is found on page 7. And as the staff came up, I did say to elected members, or some yesterday, I know that you've had a massive amount of reading, a lot of sitting through meetings the last 3 days, those that actually stuck it out. So I will try to take my time through the report today, because I appreciate you may not have had as much time to read it as thoroughly, or to read it twice or whatever. So do try to keep up. I don't want to go through too fast, but equally we do have audit and risk this afternoon as well. I do encourage you again to remember the discussion we had as councillors around questions are questions and not opinions or comments, and that if you've got something that you want to say, use it through debate, and that if you can signal that you've got a question early rather than just as I'm about to move on, that'll help the meeting flow and keeping matters to relevance. So Ian, over to you to walk us through the finance report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Morning, everybody. Yes, you've got the report with you. I'd just like to step through and make a few key points in relation to it. So first of all, just starting with the revenue and expense section, section A. Now I'm going to say that's page 2, but I've got is it page 2 in your pack? Page 8, I apologise. The set that I've got is obviously not the final assembled set, so I'll just have to add 6 to every one of my page numbers to get to yours. So page 8 of your set summarises the revenue and expense section, and you'll note with revenue we're currently 8 million favourable to budget and forecasting to be about 10 million at year end. I'll just note that the vast majority of that relates to capital receipts. So we've got things in there like the Three Waters funding, Gateway, and PGF funding that we've received. So that funding's not available for operating expenses. It channels into the capital program. The exception is Three Waters. We had $1 million of that funding, which is there to fund operating expenses. So that variance that you're seeing there at the end of the year is, as I say, almost entirely relating to capital receipts. On the expense side of the equation, I'll just note firstly, when I was here with the Q2 report, I think you asked for visibility around personnel costs. So you'll see we've unbundled that, so you can see that there. And in summary, across all of the expense items, you'll see we're 600K favourable at period 9, but forecasting to be about 3.5 million overspent at the end of the year. Now there's that $1 million I just mentioned, which offsets that, so there's a net pressure forecast there of about $2.5 million. So we certainly know we've got some pressures there that we're facing, and they're sort of noted in the commentary. But at the same time, again, last time I was here, I think I noted that I felt then there's some conservatism in the forecasting. And I still do feel that to some extent. I think it's just a natural tendency of managers as they build up their forecast outturn to be conservative, I suppose, around the level of expenditure. So I think the eventual result will be closer to budget than that, and that's certainly our goal, to bring that into line with budget by the end of the year. A couple of just noting the 2 significant items towards the bottom of the statement. We've got those 2 technical items. Firstly, the revaluation of derivatives, which is an accounting requirement to revalue our swap book each month. So that's a technical adjustment. and it represents the fact that over the course of this year, interest rates in the market have tended to rise, and so our fixed interest contracts become relatively more attractive, I guess, is how I'd put it. And then the final item down the bottom, the 22 million, is a result of the recent roading revaluation, where that process resulted in a $22 million upwards adjustment to the asset value, and this simply reflects that flows through the profit and loss account. But again, it's a technical adjustment, so can't be spent. I'll take you to the Capex section very quickly, which is my 11, your 17, I think. And just note there that we've spent year to date 15 million after 9 months and forecasting 36. So it is going to be a very active last quarter, $21 million in the last quarter. We have had a detailed review of that recently with the senior leadership team, and we're pretty confident that it will land around about that figure. So obviously a very, very active last quarter. We've got the natural seasonal sort of programs around some of our activities, roading, etc. And the contracts are in place, so we the staff are working very hard. We're confident we'll get close to that figure, and you'll hear more detail, I think, in the activity reports later around some of those key projects. I wanted to note the carry-forwards on the following page, please, page 18. And so there's a table there that just maps out. There are a series of capital projects that were phased. They are funded and were originally planned to occur this year. And for various reasons, the timing is such that that's not going to happen. And so we're looking to move those into the following year. Now, some of those, there's a long list of 3 million. 1 million of that has already been reflected in the LTP figures you've been looking at, because it was known early enough to incorporate into those figures. There's a residual roughly $2 million, the difference between those two figures, that we would want to feed into the LTP discussions, or concluding discussions over the next couple of weeks, to get that added to next year's program. Now, the funding's there. There's no negative impact from that, if you like. The funding's there, and in actual fact, there'd be a slight positive impact, I think, on the LTP, because our LTP modelling would have assumed those projects occurred this year, and therefore depreciation, etc., would already be in the base. So you'll see that come up in material around the LTP finalisation. Finally, I'll just take you to the Treasury section. Would be about 23 for you, and I'll just note, para 81, we've introduced a new graph which I hope makes it a little easier to track just what's happening with our debt levels and our net debt over the year. And so what that graph under para 81 is showing, it's showing gross debt, dark blue bar, less term deposits and cash, which is the light blue, and then the key line is the green line, which is our net debt level. And as you can see, it's tracked virtually unchanged thus far at around about 150 million. For the year, and we're forecasting that to rise as we go into the end of the year, which is around funding that Capex program that I just touched on. The very final point I'd like to make is just in relation to the rates debt, page 19. And I'll just note on this, you can see the arrears of debt that we've got there at the moment, and at the end of March is certainly higher than we would normally have at this point in previous years, and that just goes back to the COVID situation and the deferral arrangements that were put in place as a result of that, where it was possible to defer rates payments through until I think it was December when repayments have commenced. So we're certainly higher than where we would typically be on arrears, but the pleasing thing, I guess, is when you look at the movement from December to March, it's now coming down. So those repayments plans have now concluded, I guess, and the team is focusing on collecting arrears, and that's going to continue to be a focus as we move forward. And those were the key points that I wanted to note. So happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Ian. Any questions from elected members on the finance report? Right. Does anyone? Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the report. you talk about the transferring of funding over, that Three Waters funding, that's going with that as well, is that right? The carryover? If we're not spending all that, that's being spent on assets, is that right?
Yeah, there's further, yes, essentially we've got, I think it's 3 million this year, and there's a further 3 million next year. 2 of the 3 this year was assets, and it's gone into our asset program, and next year's 3 million is factored into that. Yeah, so it's all going into our programs.
That's great. Just more from me on page 8, number 8. It was just talking with regards to, had 2.2 million vested. It's obviously come back from developers. Just from my own point of view, how does that impact on our depreciation profile? Just as an example.
Vested assets. Well, in the end, they come onto our books,
Yeah.
so they will then be capitalised, and depreciation will flow.
And we add that to our depreciation schedule
Going forward,
as
yep.
such.
Yep.
Okay, that's cool. I did have a question around, we have had 90 additional properties come on that we've received rates income for. I was just curious, did we not know that they were coming down the pipeline? I'm just wondering why that wasn't really picked up as part of our budgeting process from last year.
So I think the answer to that will be just timing. You know, at the point that we have to cut off the official rates calc, which is about the second week of June. We leave it as late as we can, but it will just reflect the fact that there were more properties came in after that, before the final rates were struck.
Mr. De Haast is going to add something to that, but I think, and just to see whether I'm on the right track, we predict growth and then forecast that into our budgets, but then obviously we can't determine the level of growth and the speed at that growth in terms of when those consents are submitted and so forth. But Mr. De Haast?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Look, just wanted to endorse what the CFO, what Ian said. Look, absolutely right. It's totally it's a timing issue. So to take, for example, this long-term plan, we'll be seeking in this council to adopt the long-term plan on the 24th of June, and that's when you actually set the rates. So if you're setting the rates, we've still got another week to go, and typically there's a backlog with quotable value. There's certificates of title being issued that are still flowing through the process. We use Rating Direct, which is meant to obviously streamline the process for solicitors, but there is a lag, and it's something that we've spoken to Quotable Value about. We've sort of made some enhancements to the contract, but inevitably there is always going to be a lag. And look, having a few more rating units when we're in the new rating year is good. What we make sure is that we account for the ones that we know when we set the rates, but it is a timing difference. And it's actually nothing we can really do about it. And it's variable. Some years there's just a lot. And look, developers also know some of the tricks. We think some are coming on and they don't. So it can work both ways.
Thank you. On page 18, page 10, my apologies. Page 10, number 18. Look, I just noticed from our pre-funding perspective that we're sort of unfavourable to budget. Is that sort of showing that just because of the way the interest rates have been working, that our pre-fundings may be working a little bit against us at the moment?
I think we've got, so the receipts from our deposits are down because that's the way the market's gone. But there's equally, I think, an offsetting gain on the expense side of the equation. So the net of the two, approximately where we budgeted to be. And so the pre-funding, we're still covering costs basically. So we're able to, because of the very low rates we can borrow at, we are actually able to cover that off through our term deposits.
And I guess that difference, we're also clawing back some from our derivatives lock-ins as well, as we're refunding those as well.
Which all flows through the expense, interest expense. Yeah.
I just want to clarify, nothing changes with swaps until they mature, or we do a blend and extend. So they stay at that rate. They don't change in terms of our recognised income or expenditure. But when we enter new swaps, we will be taking advantage of new lower rates.
Yeah. I guess that's at that average percentage as it comes down.
It impacts on what our average earnings are. You can see that, but the key point is nothing changes with a swap. Just because interest rates underlying have changed, that unrealised difference shows up at the bottom, That's which currently is a $10 or $11 million gain, but it's not realised. It's a paper entry.
Sure. That's me. Good, thank you very much.
Okay, His Worship the Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. The Minister of Local Government recently reminded the Chief Executives and mayors across the country on the changes they made to Maori land and rating on Maori land. I note here on page 21, the first paragraph, that the rates in areas on Maori freehold land are rates owed to the Greater Wellington Regional Council. Can I have an explanation of how it affects this? I know previously that we do write off rates. What changes has this, the government's new direction made to how we manage this? And even then, do we have to carry the can of managing this for the regional council?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Look, there's a piece of work going on, which is actually, we're working through that ourselves. We're looking at the new legislation. And that we will be bringing that back to you. Yes, you're absolutely correct. What's shown in the report is the rates pertaining to Maori freehold land for Greater Wellington Regional Council. They operate in a slightly different way to this council. This council every year will actually remit the rates pertaining to Maori freehold land properties in our district. As a district, we don't have that many, and it approximates to $50,000 per year. The initial conversations with Vicky, our rates manager, has been that in terms of what we do now, there's not going to be substantial change, but there is quite a lot of legislation to go through, Mr. Mayor, and actually we are pulling together a bit of a paper on how that impacts this council. We're not quite ready to do that. Thank you for the question, and it is in the pipeline.
Yeah, I'll add for what it's worth, because Mark's been careful. So for all the years that I've known this council, we have always fully remitted the rates on Maori freehold land. So the ratepayer is going to see no difference. Now, statutorily, it looks like what it says is we won't need to charge those rates in the first place. That would be my read. So it saves us a little bit of bureaucracy. However, first of all, we have to set those ones up to not be rateable. So small changes in our system is how I would take it. So essentially, the multiply owned freehold land owners are in exactly the same position for our council after this legislation as they were before. They don't pay rates. Greater Wellington are much slower at remitting those rates, and we end up carrying that on their behalf until they do it. That's why you're seeing those numbers there. I think they do it about every 3 years at most. Is that about right, Mark?
So through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thanks, Wayne. They do it every single year, but actually they carry it for 7 years. So yeah, they won't remit Maori freehold land rates for a period up to 7 years, but they do an annual remission. Again, we've challenged that as well.
Just to add, does the changes that the government is making then force them not to have rate anyway? Thank you.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Councillor Holborough.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Through you, Mr. Chair. The uplift in asset value being less than we thought, why was that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, in terms of the budgeting world, what we tend to do is when we budget for a revaluation uplift, we typically will apply basically to inflation. But when the revaluers actually come in, there's a whole lot of other costs that come into play, and we do actually do a in 2014, when we revalued our land and the roads, our auditors said that we needed to do quite extensive due diligence programs. So what we tend to do is we do our revaluations earlier to give us sufficient amount of time to challenge what the revaluers first put on the paper. So typically what that involves is actually challenging the unit rates. And what we've learnt over the years that revaluation isn't just indexation. So the budget, you have to put a stake in the ground, you have to put through a budget, At the moment, we are just putting through inflation, even though we're learning everything. And in terms of the due diligence, we do actually question, and we make sure that those assets are valued to represent the fair value of those assets, because at the end of the day, those revaluations drive depreciation, and depreciation is what's funded by rates. So, so the simple answer is, we were just really pleased that the actual value of the assets was lower than what we had budgeted. Of course, we do want to get a little bit more sophisticated. So my story that I love to tell about when we value our three waters, there's lots of considerations that come into play. They look at how deep is the pipe in the ground, has it got soft cover above it, is it asphalt, is it in the water table? So when you look at that and understand that, and look at how we budget, where we just apply inflation, you can see the two are so far apart. At the moment, in terms of budgeting, we are applying inflation, and we're trying to come up with our own way of getting our budgeting a lot better. And it's a point in time. So we set the budget before the revaluation is finalised.
Yeah, I think I understood most of that. So I just wanted to ask, so that was offset by an operating surplus. Could you just talk me through that, why we had that, such a significant operating surplus?
Sorry, can I just ask where we are in the report?
Page 14.
Paragraph 30.
The forecast operating surplus. As it's referred to in Part A statement.
Yeah, so the 7.2 million that's right, should come from.
Effectively, it's all those grants from government.
Yeah, basically that's right. That's right. That's sorry. Yeah, it's exactly that. It's the surplus, the profit we're making, which is all those grants, capital grants that are flowing through the profit and loss account. So they in the end flow into our equity.
Yeah, thank you. It's a bit of an offsetty budget this year, isn't it? I just wanted to ask one more thing, because I think it's quite relevant in terms of our long-term plan process, and that's our forecast carryovers of, I think they were just over 3 million. That seems a little less than usual, and that's quite good news in terms of our very ambitious capital spending program through the long-term plan. Would that be fair to say?
I think it probably is less, I think, than what's tended to come through in the past. And I think it's probably a couple of things. There's a strong focus on getting the work done this year, which is what we want. But then also, as you say, there's a significant capital program already next year. So we're not in the process of coming up with this list. We didn't, there are others that we did not. We decided not to carry forward because there were sufficient funds there. But these were specific items that we felt we did want to carry forward.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just a little addition. You'll recall that Sean has brought a couple of things to you saying we're going to be agile and advance a project when something else wasn't there. So to make sure that we are keeping that Capex program rolling. So you've had a couple of instances of that, I think, which has helped as well.
Yeah. I was curious about why we have more sludge, but I won't bother about that.
Councillor Elliot.
Sean really wants
sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Mark, when you do come back to us with this report on the Murray Whenua, the changes to the Murray Whenua Rating Act, I would be really interested in figures around net loss to council's balance sheets. As far as they can be presented, and that's a real political question, and I'm asking for real political reasons. But I think it's just it's something I'd be extremely interested in.
Okay. Councillor, if I kind of follow you, you're saying if this is money that we don't receive. To be honest, it's dwarfed by the 49% of our district that is dockland that the government doesn't pay us anything for. So as Mark said to you, Maori freehold land is really small in our district. In Northland, it's a whole different issue. I don't want to really get in a debate about the sort of the quantums of those things. I think that would be going in a dangerous direction. However, if you want to poke the borax at the government for not paying rates, I would endorse and encourage that.
Yeah, and so certainly feel free to make comments to that in the report. Thank you, it'd be appreciated.
Councillor Halliday, I see you've got a question again. I'm not going to call a point of order.
My apologies.
Councillor?
Look, sorry, it's just a quick clarification more than anything else, and thank you for indulging me, Mr. Chair. On page 14, number 31, we talked to our Greater Wellington Regional Council rates that we collect being $10 million. I had two questions around that. One, I hear the figure 17% banded around with regards to the rate increase. Am I assuming that's 10%, say potentially 17% on top of that figure? Potentially, or thereabouts?
Yeah, that would be right.
Okay, that's cool. I was just wondering how it ties into our statement of comprehensive revenue and expense. Obviously, it's not money that's money that comes and it's money that goes as such, but does it show up on that somewhere?
Mr. De Haast, I think is.
Oh, beg your
sorry, Ian.
So thank you, Councillor. So page 14, paragraph 31 is a statement, is a cash flow statement. So what that effectively is it's a statutory document that shows cash flows. So regarding your question, so councils have contracts with Greater Wellington Regional Council to issue the rates invoices and collect their rates. And in terms of our contract, we have within 4 working days of the start of the next calendar month, we have to literally pay them the cash that we've received. So your question regarding the 31st, you'll see that we've cash coming in, $10.1 million, cash going out, $10 million. So that's under contract. So we're effectively a collection agency for Greater Wellington, and you'd see exactly the same thing on all of the other councils in the Wellington region. Regards to statement of comprehensive revenue and expense, we include, and sorry Ian, I'll answer the second part. So the Greater Wellington Regional Council rates is not this council's rates, so it's excluded from the rates revenue. So what you'll see is our rates number is KCDC rates, our rating policy, our funding impact statement is KCDC rates only. This will be the only place where you'll see the physical cash that's collected from Greater Wellington rates and paid over, and those two numbers will be the same because that's the contract. The cash that's paid is the cash that's received is the cash that's paid.
Much appreciated.
All right, team. We're now on page what is it? 28 of a 151-page report. We have an hour and a half before the next meeting, including lunch. So just reminding you of how we're tracking. Do you want lunch? So I think we've exhausted all questions. Councillor Holbrook, happy to move recommendations 101 and 102 on page 28. Do we have a seconder? His Worship the Mayor. Right of introduction.
Yeah, I just want to thank staff for this report. Really easy to read and get through and very clear and some nimble financial management going on. So thank you very much for your work.
So I open that up for debate. Councillor McCann.
Super quick. I just want to say what a great overview that was and how helpful that was. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so if you no further more, a right of reply waived. Ian, thank you to you and your team. I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye, against, carried. And thank you so much. All right, team. So we're now going to move on to item number 8.2, contracts under delegated authority, found on page 29. Who have we got that speaking to that report? Nobody? All right, so we're going to take the report as read. You can stay there, Sean. It's and do we have any questions? The report's pretty straightforward. It's got the contracts identified in there. Councillor Randall. Now, just check. Thank you. That's helpful. But I want to double check. There's no further no questions at all. So, recommendation 13 found on page 29. Councillor Randall's moved. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Halliday. Right of introduction, Councillor? Waived. Okay, I'm going to open it up for debate. There is none. Assuming no right of reply, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye, against, and that is carried. We're now going to move on to item number 8.3, which is the submission on sustainable freedom camping, found on page 31. And we've got Lisa coming to the table to just walk us through that report. If you do have any questions that you've lined up from reading the papers, just feel free to get them stacked up on the screen. And then once Lisa's walked us through the report, we'll go straight to questions.
Kia ora. Just talking you through the report on submission on supporting sustainable freedom camping. I'll take the report as read, but a short rundown is that MB have consulted on 4 proposals to better manage freedom camping. They are 4 proposals that were sort of covered off in a large range of proposals which came through the working group on freedom camping. So it has addressed some problems, a few problems only. We have responded to them. Some of them will be of benefit to us, but our submission also said we don't really think you've gone far enough. So this was again one of the submissions that unfortunately due to timeframes and resourcing we weren't able to bring to you as a draft. So this has already been submitted.
So just to clarify, the submission that is in the paper has already been submitted. It is just more for oversight for elected members to see the submission. Councillor Elliot did have an opportunity to provide feedback, and so did myself as chair of S&O. And so I think with that you've finished to the report. I am going to open it up for questions with Councillor Elliot first off.
Yep, look, thank you, Lisa and Natasha and team for putting the submission together. Yeah, I did acknowledge that it didn't cover all of the needs out there, but I do agree totally with the points that you have made in our submission, and I think it's really, really good, and that's why I had very little to say back. It's great. Thank you.
Any questions from elected members? None? Councillor Elliot, would you like to move the recommendation?
Yes, happy to move.
Moved on page 30 to recommendation 14. Someone happy to second that? Councillor Hanford, saw that hand first. Right of introduction, I think you've done that in a roundabout way. So I'm going to open that up for debate. I can't see any. I'm just going to add some comments myself, given that I provided feedback. We had a few submissions actually come through from the team, and I said to, I think it was to Wayne or the SLT, you can tell a good submission when you don't actually have a lot to add to it. So I think there was just a couple of points that I made. So well done, Lisa, to you and the team. If you can just pass on our thanks to them. And so with that, I'm going to write a reply for Councillor Elliot.
Thank you. Just in response, really good to be at this stage with this, and now I'm looking forward to sitting down when staff teams have some time and looking forward to setting up some, freedom camping rules and things that really do work for Kāpiti.
So I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye, against, and carried. Thanks, Lisa. So we're now going to move on to the grunty part of the report, and we're just going to invite staff up to speak to the third quarter activity report.
You have the whole team in here ready to answer difficult questions.
Can I just check before we walk into the report? So look, I've been reminding you of the time. We've effectively got about an hour. And I know that I've just invited staff up. Do elected member, are you comfortable proceeding, or do you need a quick toilet stop? I can't see any nods.
Because it's dropped off again. I need to restart.
Oh, we need to restart the presentation. So we're forced to take a short break. Can I please encourage you to be back in 5 minutes? Last time it took longer, which is not unusual, but this time we need you back in 5.
So just for your information, elected members, councillors, and there are some security issues. You'll be well aware of reading stories around the place, and so we are